Okay. So let's speed it up out there, back there, and we can get back to our seats if you can. There's my buddy Jack again. But well, okay. So what do we know? What do we know? What have we known? We've known for a long time that the fitter kids do better in school. This is a graph of data from the state of California, where since Arnie's taken office there, not only have they gone bankrupt, but what he's done is instituted this procedure of testing the fitness of the kids in grades 5, 7, and 9 every year. So 1 million children are tested on what's called the fitnessgram, something developed by Dr. Ken Cooper, the father of aerobics. And it basically is a 6-step standards, 6 different tests, and you either get it or you don't. And this is the way the graph looks. If you get none, you're down here. If you get all 6, you're over there in terms of your test scores. And this is the scores in math and in language arts. And this is done in 2004, but it just came out and it showed the same thing in 2010, and it started in 2002, and it's the same graph every year. That is, the more fit you are, the better student you are, the better you do on these tests. So, but that wasn't good enough, so Dr. Cooper had a law passed, raised the money to do 2.6 million children in Texas last year on the fitnessgram. 2.6 million kids. And he found the same correlation. The more fitness standards you met, the higher your scores on math, science, English, history, the better attendance you had, the least amount of discipline problems you had, and all in all, you were a better student. And the important finding out of his big study was this was regardless of sex, ethnicity, race, the school you went to, or your socioeconomic standing. So all those demographic factors that are so important for test scores and education weren't a factor. It was really a matter of fitness, how fit the kids were. And so we've known about this now for some time, but it still hasn't sunk in to our consciousness, but maybe this will help. This is my friend Jack. You know, he has ADD and he can get pretty rambunctious. So what I do every morning is I get 3 balls, and I throw, the backyard is a hill. I throw one uphill, and he goes running up, tearing up, grabs it, comes back down, and he's not going to let go of it, of course, right? Because Jack Russells are made never to let go. So, but I show him the second ball, and then he drops it, and then I throw that up. So then he comes back down, and we repeat for about 15, 20 minutes until I'm tired. And he's pretty exhausted. But then, a little bit later, Jack can take notes for me. And I call this the Jack effect. Okay, he can take notes, and he's very good, pays attention, and he's very smart. But this is what happens when I don't have time to take him out for recess. Classic ADHD story. Anyway, the reason why I mentioned how I got interested in exercise and ADD together, but the reason why I finally got together to write this book, I had outlined it in 1995. But what happened in 2002 is I learned about this school in Naperville, Illinois, Naperville is 60 miles west of Chicago. It's an upper middle class area. And I learned about this school, that they had 19,000 children in their school district. And that year, they had been tested, and 3% of the children were overweight. Well, the average then was 33% in the U.S., and the average now is 37.5% in the U.S., overweight. So this raised my awareness of the school. It really came about with Super Size Me, the movie. Did anybody see the movie? Yeah, a lot of people. Because on the director's cut, they interviewed Phil Lawler, who was a PE teacher who had revolutionized their PE program at this school, at his school first, and then eventually the entire school district. He was a baseball coach. Two of his, one son and one son-in-law are baseball coaches in colleges around the country. So he's very given to sport. He really loved his job, but and Illinois at that time was the only state in the union requiring PE every day. So he was a PE director of this middle school program. And he decided, he got honest with himself and said, you know, my kids are just not getting any fitter. In fact, they're getting less fit because I have them and I work them during gym class, I think, but we're playing games. I'm teaching sport. So what he did, which was remarkable, 20-some years ago now, he threw out the balls. He said, I'm just going to get these kids fit, all of them. So he started running, having running games, soccer, running back and forth, a little calisthenics, a little strength training, but no sport. And it caught on. And the rest of the middle school got into it. But then he had this brilliant idea, because back then they had just elevated PE to a grade like science and math in the school district. And so everybody really wanted to get a good mark there. And he was still giving his A's to his athletes, the people that really didn't need to be in gym class or in PE. So he had this brilliant idea of strapping on heart rate monitors onto his kids. And he was shocked, because some of the kids, especially the geekier ones, or the ones that were a little bit chunky, or the ones that came into 6th grade not so fit, they were working very hard to just keep up. In fact, so he began to devise a whole program where you'd get your grade by being in your cardiac training zone a percentage of the time during the week. And this just revolutionized the program, because now all the kids were getting what they worked. They were evaluated on how much work they were putting in. So eventually he convinced the football coach at the high school, Paul Zatarsky, who's sort of a combination of Bill Parcells and Mike Ditka, they call him Mr. Z, and you didn't fool with Mr. Z. And he finally convinced him to do it at one of their high schools, 3,500 kids, big high school. So, and he was head of PE, so he changed it all up and followed this routine of just focusing on fitness. They added sport back in, but it was 2-on-2, 3-on-3. You didn't choose up sides. You were assigned a position and a team every day when you came out, and the computer did it. So there was nobody. Everybody was important. Everybody was playing, and it really then caught fire, and the rest of the school systems took it up. So it led to this remarkable finding of really these kids being under, no one's overweight, basically. And what got me on an airplane to go there, because this was a stimulus I needed, because we had all this evidence coming about how exercise prevented the onset of Alzheimer's disease. If you start in middle age exercising, you push back cognitive decline by 10 to 15 years. You cut your risk of Alzheimer's disease in a third. So we had a lot of evidence in the elderly, but not much good stuff in kids. So here was this big school district or 3% of their kids were overweight. So they were fit. What got me on a plane was the knowledge, because he talked about it on Supersize Me, that the year before, 99% of their kids took this international science and math test called the TIMSS test. We take, every country every 3 years takes this test. And the US is always in the teens somewhere in science and math, or now I think we might be sinking to the 20s. Well, they lobbied to take it as a country. You could do that. And they came in #1 in the world in science and #6 in math. And these kids were spending 45 minutes a day, every day, doing very, by now it evolved into very advanced kind of fitness, training, as well as sports. They were learning their skills. And the PE teachers had gained a lot of credibility. So and a lot of their own feeling that they were important. Phil Lawley used to talks about how he's sort of, PE teachers were Rodney Dangerfield in the past. Didn't get no respect. But they were getting respect there, and they were allowed to sort of be creative. And so when I went there, it wasn't just about PE and fitness. It was, but they had started a leadership training program. They had a ropes course inside every school, inside the gym. They had team building in their junior year in PE class. They were teaching social skills in class, okay? One of the stories that just warms my heart is that he liked, by now, Paul Zatarsky, the guy at the senior high school, liked to dance, so he reinstituted dance for 4 weeks. And he was noticing that the kids, were very good about coming and doing what they're supposed to do. But he noticed they weren't talking to each other much. So he decided that he wanted them to talk to each other and realized that he had to give them scripts on how to talk to each other, how to talk to someone of the opposite sex. Okay? And when I came, they were being tested. The end of the 4 weeks, one of the tests that you had to go through was to meet somebody brand new that you didn't know, and then write down 10 things you learned about that person. That was the test. Okay, and when I was there, I said, well, you're having them look at each other, look them in the eye, or are they staring at their shoes? And he said, I never thought of that, because a lot of the boys still were looking down at their shoes. It's sort of Norwegian. I don't mean to be offensive, but it's a good joke. The Norwegian exorcist is someone who looks at your shoes. I like that one. Anyway, but they weren't looking at each other in the eye. They weren't looking at the face and all that stuff. And we had known from autism that this was a very important source of social cues and social understanding. So he tested them on that after the first day. What color was her eyes? Often they didn't know, but you only didn't know the first day. After that, you knew. So you had to, scope it out, really look at somebody and talk to them. Well, this is social skills training in gym class? What the heck is this? Because it's something that most psychologists will grab and will immediately say, wow, what a program. And now it was so ordinary by the time I got there. It was so entrenched. No one even thought about it. It just happened. And that's the way it is at this school. And today, PBS is there filming them. They've been filmed by so many different film companies and been on all kinds of articles written about the school. And a lot of new programs have evolved from this Naperville, because they've been promulgating what they've been doing. There's PE for Life, there's Hub Sports, there's all these different ways of bringing PE to a school in a way that makes sense, or at least giving the power to the PE teachers to have the time to do what they need to do. When I just got back from Taiwan, and we spent 11 days there, went to 7 universities. My book over there is translated into Chinese, and there's only 2 things that I know about the title because the rest is in Chinese and I can't speak it. It's IQ, EQ. That's in the title, IQ, EQ. Intelligence quotient, emotional quotient. Exercise works for both. I was amazed because I met with the president of Taiwan, and he had read my book, and it had motivated him to change PE from 2 hours a week to 3 hours a week. And he can do that in a country like Taiwan for 24 million people, whereas we can't do anything in the United States about anything. It is just hard. So, that's what Bill Clinton said was his biggest surprise is when he took over as president. He said he didn't have any power. No, it's just hard to get things done, and certainly quickly, but he could do it. And he was very interested in how to get other changes into the school day to get the kids more active, because Taiwan, like Japan, like Korea, and like I said, is number 1 in the world most of the time, because the kids go to school from 7 to 3 every day. They have an hour break, and then they go to a study hall from 4 to 8 every single night, from 3rd grade on. The same in South Korea, or similar in South Korea and in Singapore. So that's part of the reason why they're doing so well. But they're unhappy. They're unhappy. There's no play. There's no joy. There's not the kind of joy that they need to get back to. And so we talked a lot about that. But there is at this school, and there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of motivation, and it led to a lot of school programs emanating from it. But here's another piece of evidence, especially for you guys who are going back tomorrow to Greensboro, wherever it is, Chapel Hill. Sorry, what do I know? This is a study that came out at the end of last year from Sweden, where they looked at 1.2 million boys who were all tested when they graduated from high school, and then again when they entered the military service. That's why they only looked at the boys, because they had 2 samples, 3 years apart. And what they found, what they tested them on cardiovascular function, that is how aerobically fit they were, on muscle strength, 2 or 3 little tests, and cognitively, an IQ test and some other tests to look at how they're learning. Well, in 1.2 million boys, it's a big sample, and they tested both at both times. They found that the more aerobically fit you got, the higher your test scores were. If you stayed the same aerobically, that is, your ability to run, it's likely your test scores didn't improve. It might even have declined. And this remained true for brothers who are genetically somewhat similar, and for the very similar group of 600 sets of identical twins. That is, if one twin improved cardiovascularly, it's likely his score was better cognitively than his brother, who might not have improved and didn't improve his test scores. And these are ages 15 to 18, just as they are in our high schools. Right when most high schools, even if you have a PE program, they often they stop it at high school, because they think you got to spend more time studying so you can get into UNC, which is hard enough. But it's the reverse of what we know. because this study sort of really solidified it, that here it was, that the more fit these children were, these boys became, the better they did on their test scores. They followed them throughout their their adult life. The better academic standing they had correlated to their cardiovascular fitness, and the higher socioeconomic standing they eventually had in life. So all that came from this really remarkable study. So it's not just about PE, more PE, because a big part of the problem often is the PE teachers. Not many of them, certainly none here, but most out there in the real world. You go to Texas, physical education is all about football all the time. Unfortunately, it's about coaching. It's about, athletics, as opposed to getting every kid involved in being active, which is really the crux of what we need to do. And we need to be aware of it. We need to change our policies, and we need to focus on fitness first. And I've been arguing a lot with teachers of PE teachers who say, well, what about skill training? Skill training, definitely. But first you have to have the child be able to stand up for 20 minutes before you're worried about how they're going to make their jump shot or the arc on the ball. They have to be able to be fit enough to be part of the mix. And nowadays, when we have 1 in 5 of our kids entering kindergarten already obese, we got a problem in the future, not only with healthcare costs and all that, but with education. Big problem. Now, back to ADD. Jack, for a couple of years, was the poster child of the Adults for Attention Deficit Disorder Society or group, national group, and now the poster boy is Michael Phelps. Michael was diagnosed at the age of 9. He was the Energizer Bunny type, couldn't sit still, was put on Ritalin. His mother is a junior high school principal in Maryland, very devoted to education. Michael got a little bit better, but then at the age of 10 he started to swim, and by the age of 11 he was swimming 3 hours a day, and by 12 he was swimming 4 hours a day. But at 11, both he and his mother decided that the medicine wasn't necessary anymore. And so they took him off of it, and he hasn't been on it ever since. And he's had quite a time of it. And I always remind people, and you know what happens when he breaks training. You know the story of Michael getting in trouble. But anyway, onward and upward. What does exercise do? Well, exercise works in our brains, and it works in 3 different ways. The first is it works on our brain systems. Okay, it works on our attention system, our memory system, our emotional system, our motivation system. It works to improve those. It also works in the cellular environment. We have 100 billion cells there, and there's this environment all around them, and it puts in good stuff. It's a good recipe for growth, for changing, and we don't learn anything if our brain cells don't change. And then it also promotes new cell growth. Stem cells that we have in our brain are changed into new brain cells every day, whether you exercise or not. Learning improves it, falling in love improves it, and exercise improves it the most. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But the first thing is that exercise makes a better learner. And this is from science. It's not from casual observation. It's not from one study. It's from animal and human studies, many of them. It improves impulse control, improves behavior control, improves our attention system, makes us be able to stick with it decreases the fidgetiness, improves arousal, lessens fatigue, improves motivation, helps mood and anxiety regulation, combats depression, improves self-esteem, not just because you're looking better, but because you feel better. And one big study in Britain, of course the British would do something like this, looked at a group of ninth grade girls. They had to go out and run for 20 minutes, and they were rating themselves and when they were coming back, and they found that the biggest reason why they all felt so good is that they were done. Which is also important, because that leads to the recovery process. You see, that's when growth occurs, is when you're in recovery. It reverses learned helplessness. We have somebody from the positive psychology movement here. Marty Seligman taught us about learned helplessness a long time ago, where students, all of us, when we get into situations where we're trying, we can't really change things, we begin to feel helpless, we withdraw, we give it up. And we know exercise combats that. Makes for us a better learner because it turns on our front part of the brain to jazz up our attention system, to make this part of the brain more active, and to help us push down or stop the impulses, stop and think about things a little bit, no matter how old you are. This study came out of the University of Illinois just last year. Basically, they looked at a group of 8th graders, I believe, 20 students, had them walk for 20 minutes, had them do a test before they walked and afterwards, and then looked at their QEEG, which is a rough way of looking at brain activity, before and after. You see, this part of the brain is really, I mean, their brains are much more alive. They're much more aroused. Well, their scores were about 15% better, too, after they were walking for 20 minutes. So, again, exercise really improves the learner. It also creates a right environment for this important area of in our brain cells, the synapse, to change. We have dendrite and axons there, and this is where our neurotransmitters are released, and we need to change this. We actually grow these nerve cells. We grow more receptors, which are these things, and more, eventually more neurotransmitters as we're using them more. And when you're exercising, you're using all your brain cells all the time. So it leads to then this building block of learning, because if you don't have this happen, you don't learn anything. Also, what we know now is that our body communicates with our brain by virtue of many ways, but we're more impressed these days with what it does in terms of promoting brain growth, brain health, our ability to learn. Using strength training, just strength training, you begin, what happens is when you're building muscle, you break nerve fibers, or you stress them and you strain them, and then you set up a recovery process. I won't go into all the details, but you release a lot of these growth factors that improve your muscle's ability to get insulin, which is IGF-1, improve circulation to bring in more blood supply, to make more blood vessels, and to make more fibers. And these factors on that side are the ones that do that. They circulate up to the brain to do the same kind of thing. They make the brain healthier. They stimulate our stem cells to turn into new brain cells. So there's a lot of evidence now that our body, by moving our body, by stressing our body, by straining, and strength training, that you support the brain. Even when you're having an endurance run, believe me, you're making a lot of these factors because you're stressing and straining a lot of your muscles. Also, the big sexy new thing in the last 10 years in neuroscience has been something that we call neurogenesis, which is stem cells that we have in our brain changing into brand new nerve cells. And this is just a picture of a rat, basically looking at, this is before or without any exercise. These little yellow and red areas are the same age rat that they or mice that they were promoting the stem cells to change into new nerve cells. There's more of them that have been hatched, almost 4 times as many, so that and eventually some of them will be changed into brand new nerve cells. And then there was this study out of New York a year ago that looked at humans. It was our first study really seeing live humans, 30-year-olds average age, who weren't exercising. They began an exercise program for 3 months, 4 times a week on a treadmill. This is a picture before and a picture after. This area of the brain is the area of the brain that is an area that gets our stem cells and where we make new brain cells. The major area is in our hippocampus, our memory and learning area of the brain. And it's important, it evolved that way because we want to continue to learn. Well, after physical activity, after 3 months, this small area of the hippocampus was 30% bigger after 3 months of beginning to exercise. Now that means that they had grown a percentage more new brain cells than before they began, and as compared to the control group. So, and well as they improved a bit on their test scores, but most importantly, we know this happens, and it happens every day anyway, and the boost we get from exercise is like nothing else. Because when we learned that this happened in humans, which was back in 1999, the biotech companies went nuts. They really wanted to find the thing to turn on the stem cells and to turn on BDNF. How do we increase that? What drug can we use? What drug should we use? Well, we know a lot. There are some drugs that work, but nothing works nearly as good as physical aerobic exercise to promote the birth and growth and maintenance of new brain cells. Now, this hasn't been lost on business. The effect of exercise in the workplace. This was in the Harvard Business Review, which some of you might know, which is a hard journal to get in. But this cartoon was a 3-page cartoon looking at breakthrough ideas for the future. And this is the boardroom of the future. These people are on their exercise machines, on their treadmills, around the boardroom table. I presented this at Google University right after my book came out. I presented this slide, and afterwards one of the Googlers came up to me and said, "You know, that's the way our boardroom has looked from the very beginning." Not a bad company. They are very given to exercise, very much. They pay you to ped to work, not only for the environment and all that kind of good karma, but if you walk or you run or you bike to work, you sign in and you get paid a little extra. But for those guys, a little bit doesn't mean too much. But oh, okay. I'm almost ready to wrap up. Maybe. Okay. So what? Oh, 5 more minutes, in other words. Oh, okay. Okay. Good. Anyway, so the tread desk has come into our lives a little bit. People might have heard about it. Dr. Levine has been talking about it for 12 years or so in the Mayo Clinic, and he does all his notes on his treadmill, walking at about a mile an hour. This woman made her own down at the Cooper Clinic, a standing desk, and got an old treadmill. Is going about a mile and a half an hour. She can do most everything except when she has to handwrite something, she has to stop. She felt she was better at her job as an administrative assistant. She left every day feeling awake and aroused and ready to go home to her 3 kids. Wasn't feeling logy, and she lost 30 pounds. And this is just to look at, I got a little ADD here. Also at Naperville, they established a special curriculum for learning disabled kids. These are kids entering 9th grade who are reading delayed. And they established this thing called LRPE, or Learning Program, or something. I forget what it's called. But anyway, it's a learning readiness physical education. So it's more intense. They do more balance training, and they do it, and they did the first year right before school, so they had volunteers come in. And they had 11 volunteers, and this is their scores of growth, of improvement on their various tests. They improved a lot more if they came in and participated in the early morning program. Then they instituted the LRP for all kids who were taking this learning readiness program throughout the day, but they instituted it first period, and those that took their learning readiness right after their souped up gym class scored twice as good as those that had it at 6th period, and that's the comparison there. So then they thought, was it just wear out at the end of the day? Was that the problem? Well, the next year, and this is all done by them with a little guidance from me, but they had first period they had their LRPE, and then followed by their learning readiness class. Then at 7th period they had the learning readiness class, but their LRPE was 6th period. So it wasn't a function of being worn out at the end of the day, because the scores were essentially the same. So that it showed what they had already knew, but this demonstrated it, and there's more and more studies out there showing this, that this prompted the kids to do better, to learn quicker with the exercise right before the class. Some other things that are happening in the world are standing desks in schools. This 8th grade class in Minnesota, there's a bunch of states now that have the standing desk for the kids, and they find they pay attention better. What I call the math balls, kids sitting on balls rather than sitting on chairs, because it, in both situations, standing and in sitting on a stability ball, causes your muscles to work. And when it causes your muscles to work, it turns your brain on. So it has an effect of helping your brain be more aroused, be more awake. Just want to get to this. One of the areas that I really began my career is looking at aggression, temper tantrums, and all that. And there's been nothing like what we find with exercise affecting discipline problems. And this school modeled itself after Naperville, is an elementary school in inner city Kansas City. They went from once a week to 5 times a week of PE, just doing very simple running games, had a few machines like the Dance Dance Revolution machine, but basically we're just having the kids run and play for 35 minutes to get them moving, Well, all their scores their fitness scores went up dramatically, but what really got everybody's attention was that over the course of the year, there was a 63% drop in disciplinary problems in this school. And this has been repeated in every single school that we've been in. In this school in Charleston, South Carolina, a charter school, very, very underfunded, all inner city kids, basically bussed in from all over, had breakfast there, and the PE teacher, they had one PE teacher and one gymnasium, and she convinced the principal to allow her to have the kids for 30 minutes right at the beginning of the day. So they rearranged scheduling, which is impossible, but they did it. And what she did in her one gym is she set up a bunch of different stations where the kids, with one station they'd play basketball, another they'd do double dutch, another they'd do pogo stick, another they had some old exercise bikes that they would ride. And every 8 minutes she'd blow her whistle and the kids would change from one station to another. Well, the results were dramatic. Compared from that first 4 months of that year to the year prior, there was an 83% drop in disciplinary problems and a subsequent drop in days of suspension. Over the course of the year, it averaged out to about 50% less discipline problems based on a 30-minute period of exercise in the morning. And this is what we see all over any school that begins to change. So, saying all that, I think I can stop now and try to answer some of your questions. But I think we really need to get moving and stay moving. So.